All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Chris. And we use this forum just to provide free legal information, free healthcare information. So that's our main focus is the legal field and the healthcare field and how those two intertwine with exactly what we do. And we'll have various guests on every week. Today we have on Brittany Tedesco. She's an attorney with our firm. Welcome, Brittany.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thanks.
So today we are going to talk about Medicaid. So we're going to give some free information on Medicaid, the application process, how it differs from Medicare, what you should be looking out for, those types of things, so that you can be prepared if you do ever have to file a Medicaid application, and so you can be prepared on what to expect. So we'll start with a little bit of background information. Brittany, if you can tell us a little bit of background of you and how you got started and what we're doing now.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Like Chris said, my name is Brittany Tedesco. I've been with the firm about 4 years now. I obtained my law degree at Rutgers-Camden. I clerked for a judge for the New Jersey Superior Court and worked for a general practice firm for a couple years. And I actually clerked for Chris while I was in law school. So wound up coming back to the firm, and now I concentrate on Medicaid planning, asset protection, estate planning, and life care planning.
All right, perfect. So today we are going to focus on the Medicaid aspect of this. So if you can you give everybody a brief background and the difference between Medicaid and Medicare? Because we hear those terms a lot, and sometimes I think people get confused.
Right, there's a lot of confusion with that. So Medicare is a federal health insurance program. It's available to everyone 65 and older, or if you are severely disabled. Medicaid's a little different. So Medicaid is a federal program as well, but it's administered by the states individually. So Medicaid can help with low income, low asset individuals who are either aged, blind, or disabled, and generally who need long-term care services or advanced care services.
Okay. And I know there's a whole host of eligibility requirements go along with this, and I know the rules can get, very complicated, and you'll find some intricacies in there, and you'll see some differences. Although it's a federal-state partnership, and you would think that the rules are generally the same, and overall they're probably generally the same, but you're going to see some nuances. Definitely state to state, and then you'll see even within the different counties, you'll see some various nuances as well of what they're expecting, what their interpretations are, because they all obviously all have different supervisors and so forth. So can you give us a kind of a general idea of what the eligibility requirements are, and is there a difference between if you're a single person versus if you're married?
Sure. So with eligibility, there's two levels. First, there's the clinical eligibility, which we sort of talked about. You need to show that you need assistance with at least 2 activities of daily living. So a nurse is going to come out from the state of New Jersey and do an assessment and just make sure that you require the care that Medicaid's going to offer for you. The other is financial, and that's where there's a lot of intricacies and a lot of different requirements that we're looking at with regard to the eligibility. Whether you're single, married, and whether you're in a facility, whether you're at home, it can differ greatly. So if you're single, I'm sure most people have heard you need to have less than $2,000 in the bank. That's the main requirement, but there are also some exempt assets that you can have while still being Medicaid eligible. So some of that can be one vehicle, a prepaid burial as long as it's irrevocable, your wedding rings, stuff like that, jewelry, personal effects, any life insurance that you have, as long as the face value is less than $1,500, which there's not too many of those policies out there these days, but there are some. So that's the most basic on a level. If you are a single person, those are the requirements.
Yeah, the life insurance can actually be tricky on a couple different levels. Group is not countable, term is not countable, but whole life, as you mentioned, is countable. And if the face value of all the policies combined are $1,500 or less, then the cash value is disregarded, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I've had some clients where the cash value for a $1,000 policy has grown to over $10,000 and it's still considered exempt. So
Right. But if the face value on all those policies exceed 1,500, now all the cash value counts. Now we got to figure out, okay, are we going to keep any of the policies, or we're going to borrow against the cash value of some of those policies? And that can be a little bit of a slow turnaround with the insurance companies. And the other thing that will sometimes trip people up is when some of these mutual companies demutualized, they gave their policyholders stock. And sometimes the policyholders didn't even know that they had the stock in some of these companies. So but the caseworkers know. So when we go to apply and we didn't know there was stock there, that can also affect eligibility.
yeah, that happens a lot. We've taken with the firm and like our Medicaid specialists, we're trying to, if they have those life insurance policies, just ask if they have stock too, because it's happened. I mean, people don't know, or they get that very, very small dividend check and they just don't know what it is and it gets deposited and that's all. So,
Right. So,
yeah.
so we know now if you're single, you have to have less than 2,000 in assets. How does it work if there's a spouse that's still at home and there's an ill spouse that needs Medicaid and placement?
So if there's a spouse still at home, there is something called the Community Spousal Resource Allowance. That spouse does, I mean, the theory behind the Community Spousal Resource Allowance is we don't want people being impoverished, right? We want the person that's at home to be able to still continue to take care of themselves, still have access to their own income so they can pay their property taxes or their utilities and things like that. So they are allowed to keep a total of half of the couple's total assets as of the first day of the month that the spouse that needs assistance either went to the hospital or facility and did not return home. So if they went into a hospital in October, then they look at the October 1st date. What were your assets, all of your countable assets as of that date? And then they cut it in half. The maximum that you're allowed to keep is that, I think it's about approximately $128,000 maximum. The minimum is about $26,000.
Okay, so if you, as a couple, it doesn't matter whether it's titled in his name, her name, joint names. So if they had $100,000 in assets total, the community spouse is entitled to keep half. So that'd be 50 grand. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if they had accumulated, $500,000 for retirement, the community spouse gets to keep the max, I guess, and then a little over $128,000. So there's a lot at risk, and that's why people, need to plan. So we know what the asset thresholds are. What about income? Is there an income issue, and how do you get around that?
So the income, they are only looking at the applicant's income, not their spouse. And the maximum is $2,349 a month gross. So that is your gross income, not your net take home. If you have over that, you can still be eligible in New Jersey as long as you use what's called a qualified income trust. And that is just an irrevocable trust that the applicant has to set up. They have to name a trustee to take over that trust, and basically the applicant's income goes into the qualified income trust, and then you can pay the facility. You can take your personal needs allowance, which differs whether what type of services you're receiving, and you can pay for like your supplemental health insurance as well from there. And if the spouse is entitled to an allowance, you can pay that from the qualified income trust too.
Okay. Now we've all heard about the gifting, right?
Yeah.
So everybody thinks you can give away $15,000 per year and there's no tax, there's no issue. That's an IRS regulation, correct? What does that have to do? What does that have to do with Medicaid?
Nothing. So we have a client that just came in. They were giving $15,000 to 4 kids over the last 5 years, every year, because they could do that. Their accountant told them it was fine. And it is fine. For a federal IRS regulation, you don't have to file a gift tax return. But for Medicaid, that counts as a gift. That counts as an impermissible transfer. That because you did that, now you don't have this money to pay for your long-term care. And the theory behind that is, why should the state have to pay for your long-term care when you just gave your money away? So those are all things that we have to kind of plan around. And the earlier that, somebody comes in that we find out these issues, the more that we can plan around them if that's something that's been done.
Right. So there is a 5-year look back. So if these gifts occurred within that 5-year period, and then the caseworker is seeing this money is being transferred out, what's the quote unquote penalty? What's involved with that, and when does it start?
So penalty is kind of a bad word, as you know. It's more of a period of time, right? So it's not saying that you'll never be eligible for Medicaid, but the caseworker adds up all those gifts that you made within the last 5 years, and they give you a period of time that the state will not pay for your care. As of right now, the penalty divisor just went up, so it's about $357 per day. So it's about $10,700 a month. So for every $10,000, $11,000 you give away, that's 1 month that Medicaid just will not pay for your care.
Okay, and that penalty, this quote unquote penalty, doesn't actually start until you're otherwise eligible. So that means now you have less than $2,000 in assets and you need care. But now you've been hit with this penalty, this period of time where Medicaid says, well, we're not going to pay. And let's say that penalty is 6 months. What do you do? I mean, how are you going to pay for care? That's the issue, right? And if you haven't planned and addressed this, what do you do? Right?
Exactly. So if you haven't planned, you're in a really tough spot. If you are planning, or let's say you're married and you have that community spousal resource allowance, you can always pay from that community spousal resource allowance. But some tools that we use sometimes is a Medicaid compliant annuity. So that can make someone eligible, so make them have less than $2,000. And then they can get like an income stream each month that can help pay during the penalty. So that's one tool that we use to try and correct any potential gifting.
Now, are there any differences? Let's say someone wants to stay home on Medicaid, or they have to go into assisted living or skilled care. Were there any differences there in receipt of benefits and how long it takes for someone to make an application and get an approval?
So they say that they work on the at-home applications first, but again, it varies from county to county. Most of the time, they're just taking them as they come in and working down the list. So whether you're at home or in assisted living, it necessarily doesn't matter with the order that they're going to look at your application. But if you're at home, you're able to keep up to that $2,349 limit of your income to help pay for your expenses. If you're in an assisted living, you get to keep $116 per month. And if you're in a nursing home, you get to keep $50 a month. So that's a little bit of a difference there. And the theory is, in a nursing home, you get your 3 meals a day, you get room and board, you get all of your health care. That's why you get a smaller amount than if you're at home. At home, you can get a caregiver of up to 40 hours a week. The county has to assess that. So when that nurse comes out, they make an assessment and say, I need 40 hours a week, I need 20 hours a week, something like that. And the county will cover that. Those at-home care services, that doesn't apply in the assisted living and nursing home realm. But in the assisted living and nursing home, they're going to pay, Medicaid is going to pay the difference between your income and the Medicaid rate due to the facility. Okay. There's also ancillary services as well. So there's like transportation, and you get like a health insurance coverage under Medicaid, the state insurance. So there's that too.
Okay. Now, when should somebody consider Medicaid? Because there's only a few ways to pay for long-term care. Either you have enough money to privately pay for whatever length of time that may be that you need care. Maybe you have long-term care insurance, but typically that will run out at some point depending on your contract and the coverage period. Medicare will pay for a very short period of time. You may be able to get a little bit of help from the VA aid and attendance if you're a qualifying veteran, but then I think a lot of the default for the middle class is probably Medicaid. So when should you start considering protecting what's there and potentially having an eye toward Medicaid?
So, I mean, it's really never too early to plan because we always have to worry about that 5-year look back period, right? So I say, you know, we all know we need to have our wills, powers of attorney, all those documents done. It's always good to consult with an attorney if, you know, an asset protection trust is something that may be a good route to take. So I always say it's never too early to plan. If you're just straight spending down and there's really no assets there, nothing you really want to protect, maybe 6 months before, start getting all of your documentation together for the application. But I would say you want to be at least starting to plan 5 years before, you know, you may anticipate needing those benefits.
Yeah, ideally, right? Now we do
Right.
have crisis and pre-crisis, and obviously we want everybody to plan ahead, that pre-crisis situation. And, you know, if we can plan 5 years ahead, that's great.
Yeah.
But a lot of people just don't do that. A lot of people will wait till a crisis hits, and then what do I do? So in that situation, you know, what do they have options available to them? You know, what can they do to make sure that if there is a spouse at home, that spouse isn't left impoverished?
Well, so transfers to spouses are exempt, right? So we want to make sure that we're transferring maybe the family home to the spouse that's at home and well, so we can protect the home from a Medicaid lien. So that's always an option available. And for married couples, you know, we want to take assets out of the sick spouse's name and try and move them over to the spouse that's well. That Medicaid annuity that I spoke about previously, that might be an option that we want to consider too, to help pay for care. And then setting up maybe an irrevocable trust if there are enough assets there.
Okay. Real quick, if anyone has any questions, feel free to type that into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll be happy to answer those before we end today's session. What happens if someone has applied for Medicaid and then they get a denial? What are their options at that point? What should they be doing?
Well, they should file for fair hearing immediately. So you only have 20 days from the date of the denial that you received to file. So just get that in to make sure you're preserving your right to appeal. I would also file a Medicaid application, another one, immediately. In the event that you lose at the fair hearing for whatever reason, you want to make sure you're preserving a new date as quickly as possible. But I would also say consult with an attorney and see what the reasons are for the denial. They should tell you right on the form why they're denying it, and consult with an attorney and see, you know, what the issues are and can that, you know, be rectified somehow. So dealing with in filing the fair hearing, going through the hearing process, you would go before an administrative law judge, and they hear the case and make a decision from there.
Okay. All right. We do have a question that came in. What is the current turnaround time for approval?
Oh, Chris and I love this question. So it depends on the county. Currently now with COVID, a lot of the counties are reduced staffed. Some are working every other day. Some are working every other week. So right now, we've also heard that their priority is supposed to be intake only. So a lot of our older cases are sitting there because they're dealing with the influx of applications that are coming in now. I try to say conservatively, maybe 6 months to a year even. Again, depending on the county.
Right. And whenever we file, we want to make sure that we have as much information as possible initially. It's going to make the process go a lot smoother because you will get a request letter from the caseworker, and then you're going to have a very limited amount of time to produce that information to the caseworker. Otherwise, they can deny your application.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions for us? Let's see. I think another one just came in.
Yeah.
This is a good one. How does the current stimulus payment being received affect Medicaid? So that stimulus check that comes in.
Right. So the stimulus check, that $1,200 payment is considered excludable for assets for 1 year for Medicaid. So even if that puts you over the resource amount, like puts you over $2,000, it's still considered excludable. Just your other assets have to be below $2,000. So make sure you're using that stimulus payment for things that your, you know, parents may need or you may need, you know, to make sure we're using that payment up within a year.
Okay, perfect. All right, this is some great information. And if anyone else has any questions, they can type it in quickly. We're going to end here in just a second. Otherwise, you can always reach out to us at brightonlawgroup.com. You can call our office. We are offering Zoom meetings, phone calls. So we have a variety of different ways that we can help our clients currently. So tell everybody before we go how they can get in touch with you if they have any questions at all.
Yeah, if you have any questions, my phone number at the office is 856-857-6007, and my email is extremely long, so I will put it in the chat box because you'll be sitting here all day listening to me spell it. So I will put it in there, and feel free to email me any questions that you have. I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Brittany, for taking your time to come on today. I hope everybody found this information very useful. We are going to do this every week. So we'll have different guests on. Again, we will do some legal, we'll do some healthcare topics as well so that we can cover a broad range. All right, Brittany has posted her contact information in the chat line. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. And again, if you have any questions at all, please let us know. Brittany, thank you very much.
Thanks,
and
Chris.
we'll see everybody next week.